Welcome to Will Cadence's presentation on Walking Liberty half dollars. Will, you can unmute and turn on your video whenever you would like. I'm going to go ahead and get his PowerPoint pulled up. I'll be running that one. So Will has been a numismatist since he was 6, so quite a few years in the industry. There we go. Okay, the presentation is ready when you are, Will.
Okay, thank you very much, Liana. I appreciate all the work you've done.
I will still be here listening. I'm going to turn off my audio and video. Just let me know when to advance the slide and I will be here. Okay.
First of all, I want to thank all of you for joining me today. And I really hope that you enjoy this session as much as I've enjoyed preparing it and researching it. We're going to focus today on the Walking Liberty half dollar. Primarily the proof series, and this was Adolf Weinman's lasting creation. And we'll get into that in considerable detail. But the proof series were produced from 1936 to 1942, even though the coin itself began production back in 1916. But notice underneath the heading up there, there's the little subtitle, Back to the Future. That was a film back in 1985 that I'm sure most of you have either heard about or seen, where the two protagonists get in the DeLorean and then they zip back into the past, change things, and then come back to a completely different future than what they left. Well, that was all fiction. They made it up. But today we're going to go back to the future, and it's going to be the real deal. We are going to go back to the future, but in order to do so, we have to start out by going back to the past. So Liana, if we could have slide number 2. We're going back to the early 20th century. Theodore Roosevelt was elected in 1901, and he served 2 terms. And along the way, he took a look at our coinage, and he came up with that not so subtle quotation about how atrociously hideous our coinage looked. His attitude was primarily based on the coin just below the word Renaissance, and that's a Barber dime. Now, Charles Barber designed that coin back in 1892. It came out, and it was also the quarter and the half dollar. Now, if you take a close look, that's Miss Liberty, and she's got a pretty thick neck and also a very prominent chin. Short hair, and really, if you look at that coin, Miss Liberty could very easily be Mr. Liberty. So Teddy was kind of aghast at all of that, and he preferred the old Greek and Roman high relief coins that had artistry and images that really struck out. So he went and joined his good friend Augustus St. Gaudens to begin what's called the coin renaissance in American coinage. Augustus St. Gaudens was a noted sculptor, medalist, and he also produced some commemorative coins. And his first output for Teddy was that coin to the bottom left, the $20 double eagle standing Liberty coin. And he made that coin in extremely high relief, such high relief that the first time they tried to produce that, it took 14 strikes with the dies to bring up all the detail. Well, gold is a soft metal, and 14 strikes just isn't going to hack it. And chief engraver Charles Barber decided that things needed to be done, so they redesigned it. And the second time when they produced it, it took 3 strikes, and that's when Charles Barber really got involved and fixed the problem so that it would only take 1 strike. From that point on, the coin was produced normally right up until 1933. It is iconically one of the most beautiful coins ever produced in American coinage. He also produced a coin to the right. Now that's a matte or satin-proof $10 gold piece. And you notice the image of Miss Liberty is now very feminine. He got that right. He got the hair curls streaming out from underneath the war bonnet. Unfortunately, that war bonnet is a chieftain's headdress, and so there's a little bit of a disconnect there between cultural sensitivity. If you look at the reverse to the right of Miss Liberty, the eagle there, St. Gaudens made the legs a bit too big given the size of the eagle. Well, St. Gaudens was dying of cancer at that point, and I suppose that Charles Barber just kind of shook his head and pressed on with things. So those two coins went ahead. Anyway, let's go to the next slide. Here's the Buffalo nickel. Now, in 1913, these coins came out. And again, this one was produced by James Earl Fraser as far as the design is concerned. But he produced that in too high a relief. And so the date, which is normally seen below the Native American there, right in that area, has been worn smooth. So Charles Barber had to do some work to redesign that. And it never got fully solved. If you look at most of the worn coins all the way up to 1938, you'll often see some of the date missing. So now here we are in 1913, we've got another problem, and we'll move ahead to 1915, 1916 time period. And let's go to the next slide. And here we have enter Adolf Weinman. Now, those are his creations to the right, and those are his lasting creations. Adolf Weinman was born in 1870 in Germany. He came to the United States as a 14-year-old and in New York, and later studied at the Art Students League there in New York under sculptor Augustus St. Gaudens, who we just mentioned. And these are his two creations to the right. At the bottom is the Winged Liberty, or more popularly called the Mercury Dime. This one came off without a hitch and was produced for 40 years, ending in 1945. Above, however, is the coin we're interested in today, and that's the Walking Liberty $50. Beautiful design, and after he produced these two, Weinman would often be introduced to audiences as a medalist, and he took great umbrage at that because he felt that he was, in fact, an architectural sculptor. Well, no matter what it is, this is what he's remembered for. Next slide, Liana. And to see how well things have gone, on the far left is the Silver Eagle. That began after President Reagan signed a bill that we could now produce gold and silver coins for bullion. And that one there is a $1 Silver Eagle, and it is the #1 bullion seller in the world from 1986 to present. And next year, they're going to revise the reverse of that coin, but they're not going to mess with our friend Adolf's obverse. It's going to continue for many, many years to come. To its immediate right and below is the half-ounce 50-cent gold piece produced in 1916. And to its right is a Mercury dime in 1/10 ounce gold that was produced. And on the far right upper part is a 1 ounce palladium coin. So these, the palladium coin and the Silver Eagle, are going to proceed for many, many years. So his legacy is going to continue on and on. All right, well, now we're going to go take a look at the Walking Liberty $50. But before I do, let's go to slide number 6, because I want to point out some things for those of you who are watching on cell phones that might not be too apparent later on in the presentation. So this is a proof coin of the $50, and we'll start on the left. And Liana, if you can zoom in on the head. When you look at one of these coins, what you want to see is Miss Liberty's hair peeking out right above her forehead there, out from underneath the Phrygian cap. If you see that and it's nicely detailed, that's a good indication that you've got a good strike on this coin. Then we look at the cheek. The cheek should be rounded, and the best way to determine that is some shadowing effect in that area. If it's flat and mirror-like, then the coin is either poorly struck or worn. All right, let's move to the center photograph. And in this case, we're looking at the hand. And you see the left hand that's coming out. All right. First of all, on the meaty part of the hand, again, you want a rounded hand. There should be some shadowing. And you want a clearly defined thumb that is resting on the oak and laurel branches right in that area. You want to be able to see the index finger sliding down the branch and then ending. And then just below the index finger is a little white speck there, and that separates the index finger from the middle finger. If all of that is well detailed, as well as those two branches that stick out, this is probably a well-struck coin because that is the highest point on the obverse of the coin. But we need to check the head and we need to check the low part to make sure that the dies were properly aligned, because you may have a very good head strike, but down at the bottom you might not. So let's look lower on that same picture. And we're going to look at Miss Liberty's left leg, which is moving forward, and look there at the bottom. And Adolf had a little problem trying to differentiate the red from the white stripes. This is a flag that's draped around Miss Liberty. So he chose to use those parallel lines, as you see right in that area. And you'll see they begin at the bottom and they work their way up and then disappear to the right above her knee. What you want to see is those lines to be consistent all the way up and nice and clear. If they're either missing or worn, then you know you have a weak strike or it shows some wear. Okay, so let's go to the reverse, which is over here on the far right. And we have the eagle's legs, and those are the prominent things that we want to look at. And the forward leg, the right leg there, is very well struck because it's not in as high relief as some of the other parts. So you can see all of the feathers on the leading edge of that leg and on the trailing edge and at the bottom. But let's move now to the trailing leg, the left-hand leg. And let's go at the bottom. Let's start where the leg disappears up into the feathers. You see those lines that move off at an angle? There's 3 of them, and then there's the final edge at the end. So essentially there's 4 lines. You want to look for those when you're looking at one of these coins and see if they're present. If they're not, that means it's probably a weak strike. Moving further up on the leg, you see those feathers that are delineated. Those should be clearly visible to you. Notice on the leading edge, you don't see very much right in that area there. So this is a pretty good strike, but it's not the greatest of strikes, but this is a well-struck coin. Okay, let's move to the next slide. And now we're going to begin to talk about the 1930s when the mint decides to begin producing proof coins again. I mean, they stopped back in 1916 because they weren't selling. They were trying to sell those matte proofs, and the collectors weren't buying them. So the mint decided to forget about it until 1936. Now here we're looking at a 1935 circulation strike coin. And this is from the San Francisco Mint, which has a little S over on the reverse right in that area there. San Francisco never did quite figure out how to produce these coins. And if you can zoom in on the left coin, we'll get some idea of what kind of problems we ran into. There we go. Okay, first of all, up on the head, there's no definition of the curls coming out from under the Phrygian cap. The cheek is flat. Moving on down, let's look for the thumb. Thumb, there's no thumb, there's no hand, there's no nothing there. It's just completely gone. So that looks like it's either heavily worn or was a weak strike. Now let's come further down the leg, the left-hand leg, and notice the red stripe parallel lines. They disappear below the knee and never reappear. So this is a weakly struck coin. If we go over to the reverse and just slide over to the right there, and then take a look at that leg. Remember those 4 lines on the trailing leg at the bottom? They're not present. That's one of them, kind of very faint there. And the feathers along that leg are non-existent. So this is a weakly struck coin, and this is very typical. Now let's zoom back out and look at this coin. And if you were to grade that coin visually, excuse me, you might say it's extra fine or very fine or somewhere in there. But this particular coin is graded by PCGS grading service as a MS 64. That's 1 grade below gem. So this is an uncirculated coin, and yet look at the weakness of the strike. So it's important to understand all of that when we're looking both at circulation strikes and proof strikes. Okay, so let's go to the next slide, Leon. Okay. The Mint decides in 1936 to resume production of proof coins. The first thing they come out with is a matte proof, which is those, the Lincoln cents, the obverse and reverse on the left. And back then they decided, because we're still coming out of the Depression, maybe we want to go easy on the buyers. So they allowed coin collectors to order these coins individually. In other words, you didn't have to order an entire set of proof coins. You could pay actually 16 cents and get that coin on the left mailed to you in a little plastic container and a cardboard box, and it comes to you in regular mail. But again, the collectors decided they didn't like that compared with the brilliant proofs, which you can see there in the Lincoln cent obverse on the right, which has highly mirrored surfaces, and it brings out the detail of the image of Lincoln much better in most people's opinion. But the Mint decided to go with the matte proof on the Lincoln cent and the Buffalo nickel, and they didn't sell, so they dropped that and began the brilliant proofs. As it turns out now, there's a premium if you're trying to find one of those 1936 matte proofs. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. And here we have our first look at a full obverse and reverse of a Walking Liberty proof coin. Now, I want to read you what Secretary of the Treasury McAdoo said about this particular design when it came out back in 1916. He said, the design of the $half bears a full-length figure of liberty. The folds of the stars and stripes flying to the breeze as a background, progressing in full stride toward the dawn of a new day, carrying branches of laurel and oak, symbolic of civil and military glory. The hand of the figure is outstretched in bestowal of the spirit of liberty. The reverse of the $half shows an eagle perched high upon a mountain crag, his wings unfolded, fearless in spirit and conscious of his power. Springing from a rift in the rock is a sapling of mountain pine, symbolic of America. But look at the toning here. You'll notice the coin it doesn't really have that mirrored kind of background that we normally would like to see in a brilliant proof. That's because these coins, when they were sent in the mail, and by the way, if you bought the $half by itself, it set you back an entire 75 cents. If you bought the entire set of proof coins from the penny to the $half, that was a 91-cent face value, and it cost you $1.89. If we could go back to 36 and order a couple of dozen sets of these, we could put the grandkids through college. But unfortunately, we're not going back that far. But notice the toning here. Unlike the toning that you often see on a Morgan dollar where it's rainbow tone and it's pretty even, the toning on these tends to be uneven. That's because many of these coins were put in albums, or they were put in cabinets, or kept in cardboard boxes, or in other ways allowed to mingle with chemicals and humidity, and you get all kinds of toning on the coin. This particular coin is not very, I want to say it's very pleasing, but it's not as pleasing as it might be, particularly on a reverse, where you see that sort of brown goldish stuff on the feathers. It's a bit distracting. But this is a 1936, and PCGS has graded this as proof 68 plus. Now, proof 70 is the highest grade you can get with a coin, and there are no proof 70 Walking Liberty $half. In fact, there's no proof 69s that have been graded by PCGS. So this is the finest coin from 1936 as graded by PCGS. A standard 68 in 1936 is valued at $85,000. So this coin would probably bring in excess of $100,000 if it came on the market. Okay, so that's finest known. And now we're going to take a look at the production. Let's go to the slide number 10, the Walking Liberty mintage. And here's a rather astounding slide. Take a look at those numbers. 1936, they only produced 3,900 of these half dollars. That's because people didn't have the money to buy that half dollar. They focused on the Lincoln cent, of which they sold quite a few more than 3901. And then look at the rest of the numbers. And they increase all the way to 1942, where you have a mintage of 21,000. The total mintage is 74,400. Now that's of the entire 7-year series. Now, if today a Kennedy proof half dollar came out and they only produced 74,000 of them, there would be a gold rush to acquire those, and they would very soon go for moon money. And yet look at that, that number constitutes the entire mintage of the proof series. It's an amazing fact. And just take a look at that and feast your eyes on those numbers. Okay, so let's take a look at the next slide. Okay, we're going to do some first year comparisons just to give you an idea what's going on. Okay, that first line there, 1936, the proof 63 we saw, 3,900 coins minted, and PCGS price guide lists that coin value at $1,600. Now, the Franklin half dollar came in proof out in 1950. In the same grade, they produced 51,386 proof coins, and that coin is worth $425. So if you do the math, you will see that the Walking Liberty is 37 times more valuable than the Franklin half dollar, but it's 13.2 times more scarce. And that's a key number to keep in mind. I also took a look at the Kennedy proof half dollars. You notice at the bottom, they made 4 million of them. Now, well, it's kind of hard to come up with kind of a number that will compare to a mintage of 3,900. But I just point that out to give you some idea of what we're dealing with here when you look at the mintage of that proof series. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, this is how the PCGS folks who, grade these coins, and they're supposed to be independent and have no bias towards any of the coins. The first thing they look at is the strike, the completeness of the detail. Now, we've already talked about that with regard to this coin, so I won't rehash that. They also are concerned with luster. Does it have that cartwheel look when you tilt the coin, and have a really good reflection of the light? They look at the surface to see if there's any scratches or marks of abuse that might be on the coin. And finally, they look at eye appeal, the look of a coin. But one of the things that's very difficult to quantify is that toning that you'll see on it, because toning is kind of, in the eye of the beholder. So they tend to not spend a whole lot of time on that unless it's particularly ugly toning. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, now we're going to compare 3 coins. Now I selected these 3, but instead of blocking out the plastic holder for the center coin, I decided to include it because, as you'll notice, that's a PCGS Proof 67 Plus, and it has that little green bean to the right called a CAC sticker, which means another grading service has looked at it and agrees with that grade. I felt that if you had just seen that coin by itself, no one would believe that that's a Proof 67 Plus, because that is an extremely high grade for a Walking Liberty coin. We'll get back to that in a minute, but right now I want to go to the coin on the left. That's a 1939, and you'll notice the strike is very good. I can assure you that the head, the hands, and the red stripe on her leg are very well defined. There's nothing missing there. But notice the toning. It starts at about 10:30 and wraps around clockwise all the way down to the date. It's sort of a brown, somewhat goldish toning. And, that may or may not appeal to an individual. We also can see some pastel colors that bleed in to the fields on both the right and the left of Miss Liberty. And those are uneven, but they're there. And again, it's up to the eye of the beholder as to whether you appreciate that or not. Okay, let's look at the coin on the far right now. So for the first time now, we're going to look at what's called a brilliant proof. This is a proof where the mirrored fields to the left and right of Miss Liberty are clear of all of that toning that we've seen on these other coins. And this is a special coin here. There may be some haze above Miss Liberty's head. We can't tell for sure because that may have something to do with the lighting that was there for the photographer. We're going to talk about lighting a little bit right now. So let's zoom back out so we can see all three coins for a second. And you'll notice that the coins on both sides there show considerable cameo contrast. And yet I can assure you that none of these coins are graded as cameo. In fact, for the entire 7-year series, only 8 coins have been graded cameo by PCGS. And most of those are proof 64 and proof 65 coins. There is one proof 67. But some years have no cameos whatsoever. Anyway, let's go back to the coin on the left here and notice how strong the cameo appearance is. If we can zoom in again, I'm going to point out something. There we go. Imagine, for example, that you're holding that coin in your hand and you have a window off to the right of you, about 8 or 10 feet away, and you've pulled the shade down on that window so there's only about 10 inches of ambient light coming through. And you turn out all the lights in the room and only that light is coming in. Then with this coin, you tilt it a little bit towards that window. What's going to happen is the light is going to be striking that coin in parallel. And the light rays that hit in the fields, the mirrored fields to the left and right of Miss Liberty, are going to bounce off to your left and not be picked up by the camera. But the light that strikes the Miss Liberty, the high relief points, is going to be caught and reflected up into the camera. Now, how do I know that's what's taken place here? Because if this was a true cameo, look at the sun to the left over there at 7:30, and notice there's no cameo effect. That's because the main surface of the sun is flat, just like the fields to the left and right of Miss Liberty. And so that same parallel light bounces off and continues to the left. But notice right at the leading edge of the sun there, at the 2:30 to 3 o'clock position, there's a little white flash. That's because the light was coming in at about 2:30 to 3 o'clock from the right of the photographer. I can also point out that he had light coming in parallel from the left side because the full left side of Miss Liberty is lit up. But I guarantee you that is not a cameo coin. And the other reason I know is if you look just behind the leading edge leg of the leg, between the two legs, you'll notice the flag on the right there, between her two foot, yeah, right over in there. There's no cameo effect because that area is in lower relief and that parallel light couldn't grab at that. Okay, so let's go look at the coin on the right and see some of the same type of effect. Here, we have that same parallel light coming in from the left. Notice the sun does not have that little blast at the 3 o'clock position down at the right. It just has a little bit of a halo around there. So in this case, the photographer had light coming in from the left, but not from the right. Okay, and it lit up the left side of Miss Liberty. All right, let's zoom back out so we can see all three coins. And I want to point out the center coin here. The photographer that took this photograph had the light directly above the coin so that the light hit all of the haze and toning and bounced it right back up into the camera. If you were to take down that PCGS number just below the green sticker and look on the PCGS site, you would see that same coin and it would look much more attractive than it looks here because the photographer who took that photograph had the light coming in from the side. But let's for a moment assume that you could have any one of those three coins, but only one of them. Which one would you pick? And there's no right answer to this. Some people would like the tone coin on the left. Some would like the guaranteed grade there in the center, the 67 plus, and some people would like the brilliant proof on the right. But I want to tell you what the grades are. On the left, that coin is graded proof 68 plus. It's a top population coin, one of the finest known for 1939. The proof coin on the right is graded proof 66. And you might say, holy smokes, how come that one that looks really nice is graded proof 66? Well, we'll take a look at that in the next slide. All right, here's a rather spectacular coin. This is a 1940 proof 67. All right, there are, and if we can zoom in a little bit, we might see it a little bit better. But there's, the mirrored fields are phenomenal. There's no haze above the head or anywhere else. And what happens when a grader gets a coin like this, because he knows it's going to achieve a high grade, they spend a lot of time looking at it. And any imperfections in that mirrored field are going to be picked up. And as soon as one of them is picked up, it goes from a 70 to a 69. Then another one is picked up, it goes from a 69 to a 68. And eventually, if he's got 4 or 5 little specks there, it winds up at a proof 67. But I guarantee you, this is one spectacular coin. Now, I want to read to you a quote about coins like this from Rick Damascus. He's a noted coin author. He has a show on television. He's been looking into these things for many, many years. Here's what he says about Walking Liberty proof half dollars. He says, in my opinion, the proof walkers with the greatest potential are those examples that represent the earliest strikes off new proof dies and have been preserved over the decades in a manner in which those deep mirrored surfaces remain with their original brilliance and beauty. So that's what this coin represents. And this is the thing that as we get deeper into this presentation, I want you to keep in mind if you decide you want to look into collecting these coins. Okay, there's one other little aspect I want to touch on here, and let's go to the next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, look, there we go. And here we have a 1942 proof 66. Notice the haze in the fields. And in my humble opinion, the owner of this coin bought the label, not the coin. There's nothing I see that's really attractive with that haze. That coin has been exposed to whatever moisture, that kind of thing that happens to your sterling silver over the years. And so there you have it. Compare that in your head to the coin we just looked at, and you can see the obvious difference. There's some toning there at the top right on Miss Liberty and down by the date. So it's not even evenly toned when we talk about the toning. Okay, so let's move on. And here's a deep mirrored 1938. Now here the photographer used lighting to show the effect of a deep mirrored bold Liberty proof coin. And you can see it's another spectacular coin. This one's a 1938, but again, it's a proof 66. And it also has that green sticker that indicates that party, that third party has validated the grade. Okay, next slide, please. All right, here is, and I want to zoom in on this coin. This is a 1936 proof 67. I want you to take a look at something here. Take a look at the eagle's trailing leg, his left leg there, and notice the leading edge of that leg. Notice how all of a sudden there are feathers all the way up and down. Notice at the bottom, not only are there those 4 lines we talked about, but there's actually some detail there in those feathers. This is one spectacular strike on this coin. And this particular coin, as a matter of fact, sold in auction yesterday. I bid on it, but I was overbid. And the obverse, I didn't decide to pull that one up. The obverse was just as nicely struck at the reverse. The reason I say this is that coins with a leading edge fully struck are extremely rare. So if you go into a dealer or you go to a coin show and you happen to be looking at either a proof or a circulation strike, and you happen to turn the coin over and see that amount of detail on that trailing leg, try not to get too excited, because you are looking at a very, very special coin. And it's one, unless there's some damage to that coin, that you probably want to own. the coin sold for $8,000, and with the buyer's fee, that came out to about somewhere between $9,300 and $9,400 for the coin, which is above my pay grade. Okay, next coin, please. Our next slide, please. Okay, in 1941, we had a little bit of a blip. I suspect that the mint hired some new folks and started breaking them in on how to produce these coins. And one of the easiest things to do is to polish the dies after, 400 or 500 strikes are made with that die. And what that means is you take a buffing wheel and you go to the fields, but not the devices. You don't polish the eagle or Miss Liberty. And if we can zoom in on the photograph on the left, down at the bottom there, you will see to the right of the R in dollar, that's Adolf Weinman's initials that appear there to the right of that crag that the eagle is on. And that appears on some of the coins. And then if we shift over to the other image, that is also a 1941 coin. And notice there's no letters there because that individual that was buffing the fields either didn't notice or didn't care about those little initials, and eventually they disappeared, and the later strikes with that die don't have the initials. Okay, that's an important thing to note because NGC, the other primary grading service, does recognize these two varieties, but PCGS, whom we've been talking about extensively today, does not. So if you send a coin in to PCGS, don't expect them to indicate which type 1941 you have. If you send it into NGC, it'll come back with one or the other. This is both good and bad. It's good because if you find a coin that's been graded by PCGS, you can look at the back and determine one or the other. And if you prefer one with the letters or one without, then you'll be able to pick that up without the variety being noted. Okay, so that took place in 1941, and let's move to the next slide. And people have studied that, one of whom is Dave Bowers, who I think most of you probably know is probably the most prolific writer in terms of numismatics that's ever lived, and quite an expert. And he refers to these 1941 coins as you see above there, that the proofs issued during the year from January to October have the AW monogram missing. Later proofs, perhaps 15% to 20% have the AW sharp. Yet Rick Tomaska, who we've also mentioned, he's the noted author, he says after studying this series for over 30 years, he would estimate that 15 to 20% were struck without the AW initials. So who's right? I mean, 15% with and 15% without, it doesn't make up. So let's try to figure out who's right here. Next slide, please. And we can do that by taking a look at what happened shortly after those coins came out. It was noted by numismatists that the lettering was missing on some of the coins. So Chief Engraver John R. Sinek was asked about it, and his comments were published in the Numismatic Scrapbook magazine in February of 1942. And there's what he said: the average number of coins struck between each polishing is about 500 on the reverse, and there were 3 reverse dies. He also claims that since these coins are raised in relief in the die, they tend to become softened with each polishing. Okay, so that's basically what was happening. Now, if you take those 3 dies and you divide them into the production for 1941 of 15,412, you get a little over 5,000 coins struck with each one of those dies. And then if you divide 500 in that and assume that you didn't need too much polishing on the initial die, you get 9 polishings. So let's say that individual who wasn't very well skilled at polishing these coins, with the first 2 polishings, he did a pretty decent job, and the AWs remained pretty strong on the coins that were struck. After about 2 or 3 of those processes, all of a sudden now the AW starts to disappear, such that by the time he's doing the last 2 or 3 buffings, there's no AW apparent whatsoever. Okay, if that happened on each of those three dies, then guess what you're going to be left with? You're going to be left with about 15 to 20% of the coins with strong AW and about 15 to 20% with no AW. In other words, both Dave Bowers and Rick Damascus are correct. The other 60 to 70% have weak or partially missing initials on the reverse of the 41. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, there's one other thing we want to take a look at in 1941, and this has not been written up anywhere in any of the cherry picking books that I've looked through. If you look at the photograph on the right and look at the letter I in Liberty, and then just to the right on the, on the left, on the photograph on the left, look to the line, and then look to its immediate right, you can see parallel lines that Adolf Weinman put in there to represent that red stripe, and they're very clear and defined. And if you go to the coin on the right, in the same area, just to the right of the letter I, you notice it's been polished off. So the same individual that was just taking care of eliminating the AW on the reverse apparently got a little bit excited on the obverse and took out that stripe as well. So there may be another variety coming down the chute here shortly, but you've seen it first here on this presentation. Okay, so let's start getting more deeply into the Back to the Future. Let's go to the next slide, please. Let's talk about how you might go about acquiring a set of these proof coins. First of all, you need to read the books. And one of the books I would recommend that you look at is one written by David Bowers called Mercury Dimes, Standing Liberty Quarters, and Liberty Walking Half Dollars. And that one has a really nice section about these coins, excuse me, which includes both the circulation strikes and the proof strikes. So that's one of the books. Another one is Rick Damascus' book, which is titled A Guidebook for Franklin and Kennedy Half Dollars, 3rd edition. And on the cover, there is no photograph or any mention of the Walking Liberty series, but in the back, he does have a chapter strictly discussing the proof coins. It's an excellent discussion, but you must get his 3rd edition. If you get his 2nd edition, it's not going to be there. Okay, if you belong to the ANA, then you have access to their library, and they have a number of books about these coins that you can get, and if you're willing to pay the postage, there's no charge for that. So I would recommend you do that as well. The next thing you want to do once you've read up on the coins is determine the budget that you want to have, that you're willing to spend on acquiring these coins. And I'm going to pick a number, and I'm going to pick $5,000 as a number. But it could be anywhere from 1,000 to sky's the limit, but we'll stick with 5,000. Then you want to get a price guide. The best price guide, in my opinion, that you can get on a day-to-day basis is the Rare Coin Market Report put out every other month by PCGS. It has the most detailed listings of retail prices of these coins. You can also find the lists in Coin World, Numismatic Magazine, but they're not as detailed. So I recommend the PCGS. There's also an app that you can get on your cell phone that they put out, and then you don't need the magazine. But I find the magazine is a lot easier to deal with. All right, then you want to determine the grade you'll begin with. And I recommend you try to get brilliant proof gems, and that would be a proof 65 or better in these sets. But we'll take a look and see if we can do that. And then once you begin collecting, if you can't get a proof 65, but you find a nice proof 64, and then later on you see a proof 65, if you've used the techniques that I've discussed here, you will be able to sell that brilliant proof on eBay quite easily. Okay, so we can upgrade and eventually get to what we want. All right, now we're getting ready to go back to the future. Here we go. Next slide, please. All right, this is an amazing little display here. Take a look at these numbers. Now, we've tried to do a proof 65 series, but when we hit 1936, we discovered that if we brought a proof 65, that would exceed our budget to the extent that it would cost more than all of the other coins combined. So we had to back off to the proof 63 that we remember was at $1,600. The rest of them, however, are all proof 65s. And look at those numbers. When you consider the mintage on the right there, compared with the cost of these coins, look at that. 1942, they made $21,000, and a proof 65 is $450. If that was a Kennedy half dollar, that number would be probably 10 times that. Okay, so we're basically back in time here, and we've been able to put this set together. And look at the bottom, it says $5,400. But if we decided to only buy one of the two varieties of the 1941 coins, that would drop our cost down by $475. We'd be under our budget. So you could have a phenomenal set if you stuck with looking for brilliant proofs with those highly mirrored areas that we looked at from left and right. Okay, I look at these numbers and it blows me away. It just blows me away, because that's the retail. That's not the wholesale price. If you look at the wholesale price in the gray sheet, it's much lower than those. Okay, so that's what we've got to do. That's the way to do it. But let's say you talk to your spouse and you ask her or him if it'd be okay for you to spend $5,000 on a set of coins, and the response you get is, yeah, that's okay, just tell me where to send the divorce papers. You can back off. You can back off. Drop it down to 1,000. See if that goes. If he or she says, okay, $1,000, I can deal with that. Then guess what you want to do? You want to go right down to 1941. Look at those two coins. The AW and the no AW are $475 each. So the total is $950, and you got $50 left for your postage and insurance, and you could have those two coins. But what you want are the Bowers and the Tomaska coins. You want the ones with the strong AW or the no AW. You don't want the ones with the weak. And if you do the math on that, you're going to have about 3,000 of each. And that 3,000 should jump out at you, because take a look at 1936. That's also 3,000. Is the 1941 ever going to be as expensive as the 1936? No way. But it's definitely going to be up there right next to that 1937 coin. And all of these coins are going to take off once people begin to realize what they're dealing with here. And because of the way they look compared with the silver eagles that are still in production, many of those collectors are going to notice this and want to get these proofs as well. So you can do quite a bit with this with not a whole lot of money. Okay, Liana, let's go to the next slide. Okay, there's a complete set. And all of these coins that you're looking at here are the brilliant proofs with the mirrored fields. There's no haze on any of those coins. And there's 8 coins, even though there's 7 years of production, because on the bottom row there is the no AW coin. So there's both 1941 varieties there. Okay, how do you get a set like this? Well, you go to coin shows like I've done, and you get the catalog of the dealer catalog, and you find out who's selling half dollars, and you go up and sit down at each table and you ask to see their circulation strikes, and then you can turn to them and say, you got any proofs? A lot of times they keep these proofs out of sight. I don't understand why, but they do. And then they produce them and you can take a look at them. And if you see one that has that leading edge on the eagle's trailing leg, like I said, don't get too excited, but you probably want to own that coin. You can also go to the auctions that are normally conducted at the Long Beach and all of the other big coin shows by Heritage and Stacks and Bowers and whatnot. You get their catalog, see if they've got any proof walkers, and then register and go into the viewing room, and you can sit down and look at each coin and tilt it around and decide whether you like the toning, decide whether it really does have mirrored fields, that sort of thing, and then go bid on the coins. The other way is to go to eBay, and eBay, one of the things about eBay is if you choose to buy one of those coins and it gets to your home and it doesn't live up to the expectations that you saw, you can send it back within 30 days, as opposed to if you buy one at a coin show, it's buyer beware, and that coin dealer's in the next town, and you're basically going to live with that coin. There's also some really good auctions on the internet, and they generally complete on Sundays, but they do on other days as well. As I mentioned, there was one last night in Las Vegas that was on the internet. And you can take a look at those coins and look at the descriptions. And if you see one that comes up that's has those deep mirrored fields, then you might want to bid on it. Okay, so that's how you would complete a set. And that completes my discussion. And now I'm ready to take on questions. And I will point this out to you. My email is wcadence, at WCADENCE at AOL.com. So if you have a question for me and we don't have time to get to it, email me to that email address, and I will answer each and every one of them, and I will do so to the best of my ability. But Liana, if you have any questions, I'm ready to try to handle them.
In your opinion, how important is the CAC certification? Even with the CAC, can you still be buying the label rather than the coin, or is that less likely to occur?
Well, I would say it's less likely to occur, but I would also indicate that that's a pretty good indicator that they've taken a look at it, and the toning is not of the ugly variety. Now, a CAC sticker usually means for the grade, that particular coin is above the middle. In other words, it's better than the average. But what I find with the Walking Liberty is the grading standards just boggle my mind, because there are some really ugly coins that are graded proof 68. I mean, I've refused to even bid on them because I wouldn't want them, and yet they're proof 68 grades because they kind of overlook that ugly brown toning. Okay, next question.
Okay. Well, on a similar vein, how does toning, especially rainbow toning, affect value?
Well, rainbow toning with Morgan silver dollars is a big deal, and they attract a big premium. But you're just not going to see that same type of toning, because the Morgan dollars were in canvas bags, and there were certain chemicals in the canvas that gave it that rainbow color. What we're looking at with Walking Liberties is they got to people's homes, and they either cut them out of that little plastic holder and stuck them in an album or who knows where. And so the toning variety is inconsistent. There's no way to say, oh, this is a really good one compared to that one. They're all so different.
Okay. Do you buy graded coins or raw coins and then send them in for grading?
Well, I do both. By the way, I'm a collector. I'm not a dealer. So I'm not trying to sell anybody anything. But yeah, I do. But you've got to really be careful with the raw coins. Particularly on the internet, because the photography there, they're going to enhance the coin look, and you're liable to be very upset. But like I said, if you get it on eBay and you don't like the coin, you send it back. And I have done that with the proof walkers. I've gotten them and taken a look and, ooh, wait a minute, that's not quite what I saw. Back it goes. So yeah, next question. Okay.
Where do you see as a sweet spot, 65, 6, or 7? Or something else?
As far as a grade for a set?
Yeah.
Well, it all depends on your budget. I would recommend you focus on proof 66s and above. And that coin that I mentioned that sold yesterday, that proof 67, I guarantee you that's the finest 1936 coin out there. I don't care what PCGS is graded. They've got a proof 68 plus. You set these two coins next to each other and have people look at them, and I guarantee you, if they don't know the grade, they're going to pick that 67 every time, because it is a spectacular strike and a spectacular coin.
Okay. Let's see. Will the Walker proofs have milk spots like Franklin's?
I have not seen that. I'm sure there are some small pinpointer defects on there that may be caused by something, but it's not anywhere like the Kennedys, and the Franklins. And to this date, I haven't seen what I would call a milk spot. Now, I will say this, toning covers up a lot of defects. So if you had a little pinpointer there on a brilliant proof, you're not going to probably see it on the tone coin. It's just not going to be there. So that's where we get into buying the label versus buying the coin.
Okay, let's see. Are there different grading standards at PCGS versus NGC? Is it the coin versus the grading service? I'm not sure what that second part meant. But.
Yeah, well, everybody has their opinion. Most folks consider both grading services to be the top two. But PCGS, they try to make you think theirs is a little better. Now, by the way, I queried PCGS about those 1941 coins and asked them on multiple occasions why they have elected not to make it a variety. I mean, it's clearly a variety to the naked eye. You don't need magnification to see that. And they have responded by not responding. I have heard nothing from them. So, you know, I don't know, but eventually they're going to have to. They absolutely are going to have to. And you can't even claim that, well, the price of the two coins is about the same, so why bother? There are many, many varieties in coinage where the price between the varieties isn't very far apart, and yet they're listed because they're different. And they have to recognize that as well. So if you want to complain to PCGS, be my guest, because I do too.
Okay. Are Walking Liberty halves heavily counterfeited like trade dollars and some other coins?
Ooh, that's a good question. And the answer I have is, I haven't really seen it. I'm sure it's out there. That's why if you see a really good price on a 36, that you might want to just figure out where that came from and whether it's been graded. Now, when you see those coins in those slabs on the internet, you can copy down the number and go to PCGS and NGC and take a look at that coin. And you'll see if it's got the proper number and all of that sort of thing. So that's one way to verify it. But I'm sure there's counterfeits out there. I just haven't come across very many.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's see. One person wanted a list of the books. So to the person who asked that question, I would encourage you to email Will.
Yeah,
and get that in writing.
I'll give you a, here it is on the, if you can see that. Mm-hmm. I'll hold it there for a second. And yeah, that's Rick Damascus's book on Franklin and Kennedy's, but keep in mind that also has the Walker, 3rd edition. And then let's put the other one up here for a second. And this is the Q. David Bauer's book. You can see the title there.
Yep.
On Mercury dimes, Liberty standing quarters, and the half dollars. And like I said, his book has the complete discussion of both the proofs and the circulation strikes.
Okay, we have 2 more questions that I want to get to while we're here. We are about at time, but we're going to do 2 more real quick. Valuing circulated proofs. How is this done, and should they be sent into grading?
Ooh, you mean a proof coin that somebody received and then put it in their pockets for a while? Mm-hmm. That's going to be, I would send it in for grading, but I would expect that it's going to come back and not meet your expectations. I mean, they're going to treat it as a worn coin probably, but it might get a proof 60 out of it. I don't know. I haven't seen too many of that. People tend to take care of these things in terms of that particular aspect. It's just the toning that they have no control over because they don't realize it until years later. Mm-hmm. Okay, next question.
Okay, and where'd it go? There we go. Last question. Do you have any thoughts on the rumored proofs of 1916 and 1917? Oh,
yeah, I didn't mention that. They, in 1916, the Mint made some test strikes of the proof coinage. I suspect those were the same kind that they had been producing for the previous several years, the satin and matte proof types. but they only produced a half dozen. You'll find that out in one of the books from the ANA. What happened to those coins, I have no idea, but I guarantee you, if any of them show up, they will go for moon money, and they will rival the 1913 Liberty nickel out there. But I don't expect you're going to see those very often, about as often as you're going to see a cameo walker out there. And I haven't seen any offered for sale in all of my research. So they're hidden somewhere, and those folks are not letting go of them.
Okay, well, that wraps us up. Thank you very much, Will. It was a very interesting presentation. Do you have any closing remarks you would like to add before we wrap things up?
Yes, I do. I think, Liana, that your assistance in all this was above and beyond. You're a fabulous human being, and I want to thank you for all the help you've given me. Thanks.
Well, thank you. It has been a pleasure. And we had a couple technical difficulties this morning, but I think we've worked through them now, so it should be smooth sailing for the rest of the symposium. So, thank you all for watching, and have a good weekend. We hope to see you in more.
All right.